Hello, and welcome to another episode of My Opinion Means Nothing. This week I'm here on the show and I'm joined by Repeat Pete Poet.
Ciao, ciao.
How you doing, man?
Yeah, man, doing good. It's
good.
January, coming back off Christmas. So
Yeah, it's the new year. So, because it's a new year, I'm going to ask this question. What are the three best things that happened to you last year and what are you looking forward to this year?
Three best things that happened to me last year. I went on. So I had my first international performance. That was sick. I did a little. I opened for Tommy Sissons when he was doing a poetry feature in Paris.
Okay.
So I did like a 5-minute thing over there. That was really sick. The second one was personal. It was just about. I was regularly getting massages last year, and that was like a big step because it meant I just took care of my body in a bit of a different way. So that's the second one. And then the third one is I had one specific performance at the Pop-Up in the Luna Lounge, which is an event in Leighton, and I rapped for like 10 minutes solidly as a band jammed in behind me, and the band got more and more complex and more different instruments as I rapped on and on and on. So yeah, they're my three things. Paris, massages, and that specific memorable gig.
And what are you looking forward to this year?
This year I'm looking forward to developing relationships, like focusing more on myself. I didn't focus on myself any of last year. I was just autopiloting, going through the gigs, making sure I was giving as much as I could at every gig, all of the time. And, you know, for better or for worse, just meant that I didn't focus on my internal as much.
Yeah.
So this year, I'm going to be focusing on myself as a person more, and then hopefully I'm looking to put out some actual projects this year, because last year I was just gigging, but this year I'm going to hopefully have something to push as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So usually I just talk about what's happening in the world. I have been looking through the news like over the last couple of days. Found this interesting article today while I was on my way here about, do you know Carol Ann Duffy? She's due to step down as Poet Laureate. Mm-hmm. So there's loads of people who are in the front liners to be the next Poet Laureate. Mm-hmm. One of which is Benjamin Zephaniah, who has decided he's turned it down completely. He wants to rule himself out only because that, like with the OBE thing, he doesn't want to take anything. He doesn't need anything from the state, from anyone for him. Sorry about that.
It's all good, man. We all got mums for interesting times.
So basically, she was saying, Benjamin Zephaniah was saying that when he turned down the OBE, because he said, up yours, he thought, it gets him angry, the fact of the word empire, which reminds him of slavery, which reminds him of the 1,000 years of brutality, which reminds him of his forefathers and his foremothers being raped and brutalized. So for him, accepting an OBE is not something he would want to do, and it's the same thing for being Poet Laureate. He said he has absolute no interest in this job. It won't work for him. I won't work for them. They oppress me, they upset me, and they're not worthy. How do you feel about the whole thing? Do you think that he's right in what he's saying, or maybe there's changes that he could make? Because as a Poet Laureate, you have a lot of power within literature in England, so I don't know, maybe it's...
Okay. So with a lot of things about like the monarchy, the royal family, like how they operate in the public imagination is a lot different from the actual power they have, I think.
Yeah.
And so like it's a weird thing about like cultural power, so like soft power, and then like what you would call hard power, so like maybe monetary power or like the power to commission stuff and things like that. So weirdly enough, the Poet Laureate is very much a ceremonial role.
Okay.
And so because of the optics and the visuals of all of it, I totally get where Benjamin Zephaniah is coming from and not wanting to be part of it at all.
Okay.
Because he just doesn't want to, he doesn't want to have member of the British Empire or Order of the British Empire, you know, following his name, and that follows around everything he does.
Yeah, of course.
Similarly though, David Olusoga, historian who's
Yeah.
been doing all the Civilizations episodes, he has recently accepted an OBE,
Oh,
and he
okay.
wrote an article in The Guardian about it, and a lot of his justification was that seeing any black person receive that accreditation, it's kind of like a marker of not quality, but a marker of success.
Yeah.
And so, like, personally, in terms of like Caroline Duffy leaving the role, yeah, fine. You know, if somebody asked me right now, I wouldn't take it. But for different reasons to Benjamin Zephaniah, yes, I'm still caught up in like the colonial legacy, and I don't want to be too attached to that. But I would be totally happy with being named Poet Laureate if I knew that I could affect real change in specific ways.
Okay.
But kind of, I don't think the Poet Laureate does that. They're
See,
called up
that's
for
why-
very like, you know, specific points, and you're only ever asked to respond to specific issues
Okay.
by, you know, by basically
makes
the
sense.
yeah, by the.
I mean, the
powers
way
that
how
be.
the way how it appears in my head, it makes me think that you would have more power than, because like Carolyn Duffy, I've known her name through the whole of GCSE because she's all over the anthology, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I would have thought that because you're the Poet Laureate, you would have more pull as to what poems are being studied in schools and stuff like that. But if it's just more of just a figurehead, and when there's a national holiday, you might write a nice poem for that.
It's like holidays, like national tragedies. Sadly enough, it's you know, there'll be a lot of. So, for instance, it's been the anniversary of World War One,
Yeah.
1914, 1918. That's when the Poet Laureate would be called
Okay.
up. You know, there's been. Let's say it's like, you know, the Commonwealth Games, or
Yeah.
like, you know, England are in the Cricket World Cup, or you know, a large national level public event is happening. That's when the Poet Laureate, like,
Yeah.
or at least that's when the Poet Laureate is seen to be visible.
Okay.
Behind the scenes, the Poet Laureate just hasn't got that much sway, I don't think, anymore.
Which is upsetting though, for literature, because I mean, just language itself, I feel like written words are the only things that's evolving nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Any other forms of communication, or just the way how we make notes of things, it's not really evolving. It feels like it's just staying the same or getting worse, whereas the written word is actually thought-provoking.
Mm-hmm. Within the world of like poetry as well, to have we're talking about the you know, the Poet Laureate for the UK.
Yeah.
There's the London Young People's Poet Laureate.
Yeah, no, I
which
saw
is
that
a
as
far
well.
more like, for me, I feel more like a Londoner than I do arguably like, you know, a member of the British Empire,
Yeah.
which is what, you know what I mean?
100%.
So if it was about yeah, the things I like in the London Young People's Laureate, the opportunities that you get to do there are the sort of stuff that I'd want to do on a national scale, but they don't seem, it seems more of
Yeah.
a ceremonial thing, whereas the London Young People's Poet Laureate seems more like
Your
an
actual
active
role,
role.
yeah.
Mumtaz and Mary is the current one. Caleb Femi was it for, you know,
Yeah.
last year, and they had real impactful things, and they were coming from a spoken word culture, more of a spoken word culture, especially Caleb, but he's also a teacher. They could do that thing of marrying up like modern multi-ethnic London slang and like, you know, language, putting it on paper and not having it lose its like potency, and that's a sick thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of that energy coming from younger writers, specifically younger non-white writers, I think that's like a super important thing that the Poet Laureate for the UK should be doing
Yeah.
on a national scale.
100%.
Yeah.
So what else?
It's a good question though, and it is definitely
Yeah.
like in the air. Like, people are talking about whether to understand Britain is to understand it as an empire. I find outside of specifically England, and outside of what you would call the mother country of empire, Britain's influence is felt in the Commonwealth and in the empire across the world. It's
Yeah.
like a post-colonial legacy that we don't have the same. We in the UK don't have the same exposure to.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? England and the British Empire managed to export its governmental systems, its judicial systems, its educational systems, its like architectural city planning systems, and all of these things, despite, you know, after the fall of the empire, countries gaining their independence, all of these institutions and systems and ways of being are still so influential.
Yeah, 100%.
And I find that to be a weird way in which we in the UK interact with empire versus the way that everybody else in the world interacts with the remnants of the British Empire.
Yeah, like for example, the Commonwealth, I really think it's a bizarre idea. Like, all of these countries are now free from the UK, but everyone's still within the Commonwealth, and it's not, and the UK is the head of the Commonwealth, so it's like everyone's just still in the empire, to be honest, when they have Commonwealth games and stuff like that, and it's just like, well, hang on, you let all these countries free, but now they're just all under the Commonwealth, and they're still under your ruling because the UK is just still the leader of the Commonwealth. So it would make more sense for me if there was, say, I don't know, 1 year Spain was the leader of the Commonwealth, or so, like whoever, all the other countries or whatever, like, or the Caribbean, or like each year another country within the Commonwealth got a chance to run it. That would make it feel for me that was more like there was some sort of change, but it just feels like it's just a different heading or a different thing put over
Once
it.
again, comes down to, like, you know, how the Commonwealth exists in people's imaginations, especially in the imaginations of each of the nations within the Commonwealth, versus like how the Commonwealth exists on like a financial level or a power distribution level, because it appears to be quite lateral. I feel the Commonwealth appears to be way more equal, unquote, than, you know, like the British Empire from which it stems. But of course, you think about just like, you know, you think about trade between Commonwealth countries and how specific, you know, like crops and resources are heavily subsidized in X country, but their prices are jacked up in another country. And a lot of this, once again, stems from, like, you know, just stems from colonial era wealth removal from certain countries towards other countries. And I think that, once again, the Commonwealth, in an age of Brexit, in an age where everyone's like, oh, we need to go back to trading with the Commonwealth and stuff, and it's like, well, if you were going to go back on a genuinely equal level with each of the other Commonwealth countries, then there would just have to be a hell of a lot of reduction in the workings of power of the British state compared to other nation states. I'm not even too hot on nation states, but if that's how we're doing it, then there's going to have to be a rebalancing of power, a redistribution of wealth and resources.
That's true.
But
okay, I saw this and I was a bit confused. I don't know if you've seen it in London, but maybe outside of London, they've been seen in Tesco's, Sainsbury's, any of the major high street stores. They've already put out Easter eggs.
Easter eggs?
Yeah.
In January?
They put it out from New Year's Eve, apparently.
Okay.
They've had Easter eggs in the store since the end of Christmas.
Right.
But it's just like, it feels like institutions or people that are selling things, they're trying to push on the holidays before they even get there. So like, even with Christmas, I saw Christmas from the end of, the moment Halloween ended, I was seeing Christmas decorations out, and I was just like, well, it feels like they're wishing away time before it's even there.
Yeah, but I mean, so when did DFS not have a sale on?
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? And so like, it's the act of like commercial like institutions. Yeah, commercialism. It's easier to sell stuff when you can tie it to a festival, or you can tie it to something that people tend to be happier about. So I worked in a co-op supermarket, a co-op corner shop, for like, you know, just under a year, on my gap year, in fact. And so we started getting Easter eggs we started getting them in November, and we had them in our stock room until mid-January when we started putting them out. You know, you take down all the Christmas stuff and you switch around the displays. But weird enough, I don't necessarily inherently blame shops for that, because, you know, you don't blame a snake for slithering. Like, I expect them to do that. But of course, it is bare annoying. I'm like, you know, people are barely through Christmas, New Year's, all of the money that you have to spend on that.
Yeah.
And you know, and then all of a sudden it's the next one I already have to think about.
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Easter
That's what I mean.
is time for like holidays. People like to get away.
Easter
That
isn't for
kind of
another
thing.
like 3-4 months as well. We've
Yeah.
just started into January. It just seems so apprehensive. I'm already thinking about Easter, and then when Easter ends, what's the next holiday after that? They will be putting it out for that. So
Here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that we in the UK are more likely to have a white Easter than a white Christmas?
that sounds very right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange. It's a quirk of the weather and the statistics. I
Yeah.
heard it on a podcast yesterday, and I looked it up, and I'm just like, I do not believe it. But then, yeah, you know.
I mean, the way how global warming is working at this moment in time is we want things to stay as they are because I don't think they're going to get any better. So we just want it to just stay at because last year's summer, it was pretty damn hot, you know, and I don't want it to be hotter than that. I wouldn't want it to be colder, but like it just feels like maybe it's felt like the same weather since October. We're now in January.
Yeah, but now we're gonna have the cold winter snap.
Yeah, they said
we're
that-
recording in like the first or second week of January.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be the later weeks of January and February and March that are
Yeah.
gonna be blitz.
The beast from the east that said it's coming back.
Yeah, last year was about the same time.
Yeah,
as well.
it's true. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth it. Okay, why can't I click on this? Oh, that makes sense. So there's this new, I guess, scheme that they're doing at this moment in time to kind of update prisons.
Okay, yeah, prison reform. Is that
Yes,
what we're on about?
yeah. So they're thinking of taking the bars off windows and making cells look more like rooms.
So like, you know, a full door instead of cells.
Yeah. And
Okay.
like instead of have bars on windows, they'll have, I don't know, an open window or just something maybe hazed out or something
Yeah,
like that.
fine.
So it's kind of bringing more respect to the criminals or the inmates.
Right.
And they said also they instead of calling them inmates or prisoners, they're going to start calling them men.
Okay.
So, to me, I don't know, it feels like... I've never been to prison myself, but from what I see from videos and the way how people are able to get mobile smartphones so easily into prisons and be able to film their experiences within there, you do a crime and you get treated better than the worst person who lives on the streets, you know?
So have you seen The Dark Knight, yeah?
Yeah, I've seen
You know
that.
the last scene of The Dark Knight where there's the criminals on the boat and then there's the standard civilians on the boat.
Yeah.
And they each have the detonator for each other's, like, you know, boat,
Yeah.
The reason why I bring that up is because it speaks to how we view our prisoners, specifically in this country. Like, I know it's
Okay.
America, but in the UK, like, prisoners, anything to do with prisons is barely ever spoken about. It's never a vote winner. You're not going to win
Yeah.
any election votes on that. And they tend to be not only intentionally overlooked, but in terms of you know, the institutions of the country, it's like deliberately, consistently, chronically underfunded.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm always worried about whatever the surface changes are to prison, what's actually happening, nuts and bolts, in the prison, like effectively, you know, the prison industrial complex, and like, you know, the PRU to prison pipeline, if it's in the UK. I'm always far more worried about the changes that are going on that will affect that. So for instance, like, you know, you look at how much the average prison worker gets paid, and how, as an effective austerity since about 2010, those wages have either stagnated or gone down, or like definitely not increased with inflation or whatever. You look at obviously the increased danger and overcrowding in prisons, and because prisons are set up to be, especially in the UK, they're set up to be not places to reform people. They're places of punishment, and it's all about making an example instead of rehabilitation into society. So I do get what you're saying about the optics of it being. It looks like, oh, prisoners are being treated better, but you got to understand, they're prisoners. Their freedom's been taken away, and if we ever want them to be like not a
menace to society.
Yeah, or menace, or not a threat to society. If we want them to actually be able to come out of prison and go back into society, then weirdly enough, you have to invest in them.
Yeah.
Like you have to train them and give them skills. You have to. So the classic example is like, you know, in America there'll be like, you know, barbers, and there'll be you know, like metal work, and there'll be all these activities in giant air quotes that you do, and weirdly enough, that labour in America is often, it's effectively slave labour that they can use to, you know, sell products and stuff like that. I'm not sure about how it works in the UK specifically in terms of that stuff, but yeah, like what I do know is that each Justice Secretary for the Conservatives since 2010 has just been consistently awful for prison reform. They talk about it and do nothing. There was, I think, Chris Grayling before he was Transport Secretary, or it may have been Michael Gove when he was Justice Secretary, but either one of those two were trying to remove books from prisons. They were trying to remove books from libraries from prisons. And you think about, you know, what are they? The first thing that colonizers did to would-be slaves was they stopped them reading. They removed their language. They removed their intelligence in that sense. And so, yeah, like, I'm from Chelmsford in Essex, and there's famously, like at HMP Chelmsford, there's a prison in the centre of my city, and I think a lot about how dilapidated I know it is. I once had a conversation with Vicky Ford, my current MP for Chelmsford, on a train back home from Liverpool Street to Essex. I was talking to her about just like, you know, what's going on in the city, and I mentioned to her, like, I asked her what are some of her key issues and topics that she'd like to think about. And she was talking about how she's been into the prison 3 or 4 times since she started her tenure. And she was talking to me about how, basically about how the conditions aren't squalid, but they need to be improved. How getting medical treatment into the prison is now so much harder because they're not training prison staff in any in medical stuff. They're now training them in basic first aid, and then it means that any time the prisoner is ill, they have to take them obviously out to the hospital, and that takes up staff and resources, leaving even less prison wardens on the wing, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you know what I mean? I'm not a fan of prisons, but there's poetry slams in prisons, which I did not know. Joel Taylor has been running a poetry slam in I think Pentonville for the past 10 years, and they're like a big part of prison. Well, a big part of. For a poet looking at prisons, I find that, you know, that can be a really important thing to exist in a prison context.
But it's funny that the government don't like want to spend a lot of money on it, or they don't want to talk much about it, but it's a big issue because the prison system was just going to be taken away from the royal family that run it, is it? Or the government that run it, and they're just going to be more privately run soon. A lot of them are closing and being privately run, which is worse, to be honest.
It's like that with youth centres as well. So like G4S famously, you know, Philip Hammond's wife famously owns G4S, or Philip Hammond owns a bunch of shares in G4S. And so if you look at, like, you know, the private security, private prison combination, you look at, if you're running prisons for profit, what is the incentive?
I know.
The incentive is to make money, and therefore to have a prison that's stacked full of people. Hence hence the criminalization of like, you know, small drugs. Hence the over prosecution of small drugs charges. Obviously, the massive over-representation of black men in prison, because it means you need to criminalize a large set of people so that you can keep your prisons full. Do you know what I mean? That's once again, it speaks to what the reason and philosophy behind our prison system is at the current minute. It's definitely about making money and about, like, you know, having your prison stacked full. If you go to, I think, like, you know, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, prisons are very much they're openly a rehabilitation process, and that's how everyone kind of understands them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's how I've always thought there should be, to be honest. Rehabilitation, but I don't know. I know what you're saying. I know where you're coming from. If you see people that go to prison as human, then they don't come out thinking that people don't think that much of me anyway, so what's the point of me trying to do better?
Yeah, very much so.
What else is there? Did you hear about the drones
Yeah, man.
at Heathrow this time?
Yep. This morning, this was, yeah?
Yeah, this morning I saw that. I thought it was like it's the first time I went on my news app yesterday, and I was like drones at an airport, but isn't this last year? That was Gatwick last year. At Gatwick, did you hear this? The re-report, there was actually no drone at all. It was just hearsay. Someone said that they saw a drone, but
No. So I heard this, but I read the opening paragraphs of. Sorry, I read the police detective or chief constable who was giving the press conference. I read the transcript of the press conference, and what that was that they couldn't deny that there may not have been a drone, and so they're working on the assumption that there was, but technically they can't rule out that there wasn't a drone, and so it's the whole thing of the police covering their backs and
well, I mean, it makes sense that, because what doesn't make sense to me is there was a drone in the sky and the police couldn't stop it, and they called in the army and the army couldn't stop it. What is this? What does that say about our defense systems if a drone can just slip by it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so building on that, I think it's just about how antiquated a lot of our laws and especially our laws around airspace and airports. The British attitude to airspace is so different as well to many other countries of like similar GDP, similar population size, similar what you would call global standing and stuff. But it's very hard because all of the like public furore, the media furore specifically about it, is used as a place of let's just shoot them down. What on earth is going on? And I'm like, yeah, there's ways in which I'm not against. So in the background of all this for me is the Stansted 15. Yeah, okay. And the Stansted 15 were a group of peaceful protesters who blocked a British Airways flight which was carrying citizens that were going to be deported to other countries, and they blocked this flight. And then they got charged with terrorism charges for that, and they got sentenced on a guilty verdict to cherubim charges. They're currently appealing it, and you know I think it's a very, very heavy sentence. It's using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut.
Yeah. And
so with the like background of this going on, I think it adds another level to how we're viewing, you know, the conversations of like airspace safety, drones interacting with flight sort of stuff. Obviously very, very unsafe, all that kind of stuff. You know, there needs to be a wider zone of exclusion around airports. Chris Grayling, Transport Secretary, has already said they're going to start doing that after the one that happened last year.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of this is a way to manufacture consent from the public to be incredibly hard with anybody who dares to disrupt, you know, flights for any reason, which I don't think, you know, you can't blanket do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know specific things about, you know, like aeronautical engineering legislation or any of that kind of stuff. But what I do know is that the Stansted 15 have been wrongly prosecuted, and that this drone story, it's in the same wheelhouse, but people aren't connecting the two.
Yeah, that's most things, really and truly. I thought this story was kind of interesting. So there was this lady in Wales, I think it was. Is she from Wales? And she's been having this reoccurring dream for the past 40 years. Ireland, she's from.
Okay.
And in her dream, she sees herself as this black man from New Orleans.
So this is a white Irish woman
Yes.
in 2018 who's
Yeah.
had the same dream for 40 years
Yeah.
and dreams that she is a
Black man from New Orleans
Okay.
who's been committing murders.
Mhm.
She says that she's had a lot of bad luck, which is just in general. But the reason why she believes that it's a black man is because when she has looked in the reflection within the dream and seen a black man looking back at her, and she doesn't know who the person is. Maybe she believes in reincarnation. She believes that maybe in a past life she was this black man from New Orleans. But other than that, her life has been pretty bad luck. She said that she was allergic to a ridiculous amount of things, always in and out in hospital over the last couple of years. She's allergic to grass, cats, dogs, horses, gala melon, mold, hazelnuts. She broke both of her legs, her back. She's broken my back around 4 bones. She's broken 4 bones in her back. She had 4 car crashes in 5 years. She's just not very good with luck, but she just has been having this reoccurring dream of a man from New Orleans.
I've not heard about this, but what's the question?
No, I just thought it was interesting. So I just thought the article was interesting that do you believe in reincarnation or past lives, or is it just energy? I just believe maybe it's just energy because when you die, nothing goes anywhere, everything stays here. So
ashes to ashes, dust to dust type thing.
So maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe the energy from Joan of Arc might be in the soil, so that maybe because everything's reused, so through the cows eating the grass and you've eaten the meat, and so through the meat you've taken a piece of energy from someone else.
So on the generally believed to be pseudoscience, unbelievable side of this spectrum is homeopathy and that kind of thing, and remnants of XYZ's blood in water distilled 1,000,000 times, etc. The other side, the more side that I think is and has shown to be scientifically provable, in double-blind tests and peer-reviewed, all that kind of stuff, is stuff like morphic resonance, where you can effectively feel that you're being observed without knowing it. You can but you can feel active connections to and learn about and intuitively apparently know things that you've never experienced.
Yeah.
But when you're prompted to give the information, you can do that. So man, that story about the white Irish woman who's been having a dream every day, dreaming that sees a black man from New Orleans, that's mad.
Yeah.
But I don't know enough about, I guess that would be parapsychology. I don't know enough about that to comment, but damn, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I know. I just thought it was interesting that someone. What about
What else we got? Hit me.
mixed race?
Oh.
I saw this article today. If it loads up, oh no, it's here. It's the thing of mixed race people, or it's the fastest growing ethnicity within the UK. Mixed race just means mixed heritage, where you could be Spanish and Italian, that's mixed race, technically. The whole thing of race in general annoys me because race is used to define a color or a shade of skin when race is human. There's no other race. Race is just something that's been constructed by us so we can categorize other people. So there was this girl who she's in this article, she's basically talking about how she has a white mother and an African American father.
Yep.
But for most of her life, people have assumed that she's white because she's fairer skinned. And then she said that she just finds it a bit offending that she'll get asked questions like, is that your real father, and stuff like that. And that's the question it brought on board for me. It's just, I'm not mixed race, so I can't fully answer this question, but
Where are your parents from?
both my parents are Jamaican.
Cool. Both my parents are Ghanaian.
Yeah. But it's the question of, I always see this, like even in TV shows, when there's a mixed race character, there's always this question of, it's usually mixed between black or something else, but it's usually a thing of, they have to choose a side of who they're supporting more of, or and if they choose the white side, then they're denying their black side, and if they choose the black side, they're denying the white side, and it's just all this, like, there's always a battle, or so why can't it just be I accept this? And it's like, I think she talks about it here, like although she's mixed race, she still supports the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that. So I don't know what my question is here. It's just, should they have to choose? They shouldn't have to choose, obviously, but
So, yeah, mixed race being, people defining as mixed race being the fastest growing culture across the world,
Yeah.
that's obvious, because if you look at how many black people were exported from Africa across colonial times,
yeah,
it's no surprise then that the amount of like people with black African heritage mixing with people without, or people that don't have black African heritage, that's not surprising to me. There's all of those predictions, the visualizations of, like, you know, what the average human being will look like 100 years in the future.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, a mixed race person. They
Sort
might
of
have,
South Park, yeah.
like, you know, you might have blue eyes and, yeah, like frizzy hair and that kind of thing, but they may have, like, you know, a darker than what we would call traditionally white Caucasian face, but like maybe more features that we define with being African, maybe like a larger nose and cheekbone. I'm not sure what the specifics are, but I know them when I see them. And so, yeah, like I think the mixed race as just a concept, as an idea, is still fairly fresh in, like, you know, the global public mind. You know, being mixed race was literally illegal in South Africa during apartheid, which only ended, you know, in people of it ended within our lifetime, the past, like, you know, 40 years or something. Do you know what I mean? So,
like the categorization thing in the UK only came about in 2001, and I was
on
like,
British passports,
I was like, wow, that's actually not that long ago. But for me, I've always grown up knowing that there's mixed race people, so it's just,
So I think that in the ensuing, you know, 10, 20, 30 years from now, the concept of being mixed race and just having mixed heritages will be way more cemented into just millions more people's identities, and so naturally it will be less of a surprising thing to comprehend.
So is it just that maybe people's kind of like a thing of racism in a way, where like, although we've fast forwarded to a point where there's a lot more powerful black people, there's not a lot of them, but there's a lot more than there was back in the day. That
but we still haven't dealt with the systemic underlying issues. And
exactly.
That's, very much with the mixed race issue as well. You know, you can't talk about the issue of being mixed race without talking about, like, you know, the one drop rule in standard racist psychology that posits, you know, if you've got one hint, 124th of your heritage is black, then you're completely black. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing that doesn't go both ways, because there's still a difference in racial power dynamics.
Yeah.
And so you think, well, if we're now gonna understand mixed race heritage more, means we have to understand colonial history more. We have to understand why there are mixed race people from these national or state heritages, whatever they are. You know, I think once again comes down to this understanding of the British Empire as something that's influences are still, you know, across the world, actively shaping how the world is. We need to deconstruct and revolutionize those systems before we can have any truly new understanding of what it means to be mixed heritage outside of the existing power structures.
Yeah. So Brexit is my...
Brexit, love it.
There's no real news on there, but at this moment in time, because it's the first of the year, and we're meant to be signing the agreement that makes us leave the EU in March. I can't remember the date.
I think it's March 30th, if it's not soon, but yeah, B-Day, Brexit Day.
And there's going to be, I don't know, what are we going to celebrate the day?
You can vote as well.
But although we won't actually leave the EU until 2020.
Of course.
It's, I don't know. We won't have a revote because it's stupid, because it will just... I think it's stupid in the fact that if we have a revote just on Brexit, what else can I revote about? We didn't vote for the right Prime Minister, let's have a revote.
Referendums aren't elections though. Referendums are different.
I guess so, but it's just that concept of you didn't take we made a vote as a country, whether the information was there or not. The government decided...
The information wasn't there.
Yeah, 100% it was not there.
So, but does that not... Okay, so here's... Just to play...
Devil's advocate,
No,
yeah.
not devil's advocate.
Ah.
Just to have Socratic dialogue.
Okay.
Yeah, because the devil don't need an advocate. He's the devil, but I quite like Socrates and I quite like dialogue. But no, just to throw it between us, there's like 6 or 7... Sorry. There's at least 6 or 7 active investigations into many parts of the multiple Leave campaigns that prove that they were unlawful.
Yeah.
Whether it's like, dirty money, whether it's information that they weren't legally allowed to have, Cambridge Analytica, you think about just the way in which this referendum was conducted.
Yeah.
That alone, in many other instances, in terms of electoral politics, in terms of practiced democracy in this country, so the actual way we do politics.
Yeah.
So many investigations would be reason enough in many other votes for us to just put the thing on hold and be like, hold on, all of our information was based on, unlawfully gained things and something like that. So that's one reason.
Okay.
Secondly, as well, just not having the information. I don't think that, and even if you can make the case that we were arguably well informed on the first vote, you can say that to have a vote now, you have to put it back to the people.
Yeah.
Because there's no consensus in Parliament, in the political parties, in the House of Lords, in the House of Commons, however you want to split it in our representative democracy, the people who are meant to represent us,
they're not representing us
can't.
well.
No, it's not that they're not representing us only. It's that they can't come to an agreement on how to not represent us.
Yeah, I guess
Do you know
so.
what I mean? And so I'll be much happier, and I think it would be a better. It would be a more accurate practicing of a representative democracy if our representatives went, we don't know how to properly represent you, let's get a better and just another vote in so that we can have a better understanding of it. And I think that also what needs to happen is Article 50, it was an error triggering it immediately after the referendum because the referendum weren't even binding. It wasn't even...
I didn't think it was, no.
No. The only thing that made it binding was Article 50. As soon as we put that statute of law through, it meant that we had to leave on that date. That's that started the clock. Otherwise, we could have sat there and twiddled our thumbs got our ducks in a row, sorted out what it would actually be like to leave the European Union, had all of those debates then, but of course, no. Jeremy Corbyn immediately triggered Article 50. Theresa May was like, Jeremy Corbyn immediately called for Article 50 to be triggered, and Theresa May was like, yeah, boom. Because, the Tory party in Europe have a long history of letting it destroy their party. And Jeremy Corbyn wants the Tory party to destroy themselves, and then he can sweep into power once they've, shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
But Jeremy Corbyn's another question. Yeah, that's roughly where I am on Brexit right now, as of the first week of January 2019.
I guess it's another way of looking at it. I didn't think about it like that. If it could be, we didn't have to leave. If the referendum itself wasn't legally binding until Article 51, then we could have literally. So, could we have found out more? Did the referendum have to be when it was, or could we have waited maybe until now to have the referendum?
Well, no, like David Cameron. So it was in the 2015 Tory Party manifesto that they were going to hold a referendum in the next Parliament.
Okay.
And that was under fixed term Parliament rules, so that was 5 years. So there was always going to be a referendum between 2015 and 2020. He called it early, and I suppose they didn't have the referendum then, but there was going to have to be a referendum quickly because, you know, the Tory Party had moved right to try and, you know, get a lot of those UKIP voters, which they did, because UKIP went from, you know, having basically there's like zero UKIP council seats across the country after that 2015 election and the 2017 election. And so the Tory Party wanted to placate their more harder right-wing MPs and voters, wanted to have a referendum quickly, regardless or not of how well it was done, because I don't think that it's an issue of putting party over country. There was no real pre-thought into how Brexit would affect the public, really.
Yeah.
It was just shit, we'll have a vote. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, swear away.
Fucking don't, mate. So, like, do you know what I mean? They're thinking, for fuck's sake, we have to do this because we promised it to our voters. Obviously, the establishment Tory party was for the side of Remain. They didn't want us to leave, really, but they wanted to be able to say, we've had the conversation, now let's continue as is.
Okay.
So, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of machinations internally within the Tory party, and then on a different level within the whole country.
I get what you're saying from that front, because it seems to me like it's like they didn't think that we were going to vote for the UK to leave as it would, because they had no
it's a bad thing to do.
Yeah, they had no plan for that side. They just had the plan for, okay, we're going to remain. Let's just remain. And then once the population were like, or the nation were like, well, let's leave.
Well, you know, essentially, I mean, like, I agree, but it's not even the nation. It's not the populace. It's the population that voted.
Yeah.
If you once again look at Brexit is a thing that not only affects everybody who voted, everybody who didn't vote.
Yeah.
It affects all of the British people living outside of Britain.
Yeah.
It affects, in an interesting way, lots of people who view themselves to be British outside of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Let's say they're living in Jersey, or they're living in the the British-owned territories in the Caribbean, or let's say they're even the British expat community in Hong Kong and places like this. It's done a lot to change. It's done a lot to bring the conversations of British identity forward from the Second World War, basically, up to now. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but it feels like they're just going back in time by doing that, because then we're on our own, and then we have to fight and find everything ourselves, and we have to build all these relationships again, and no one wants to trade with us.
Yeah, but rule Britannia rules the waves. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You got to understand, in the idea of in the psyche of, not in the specific psyche of, but in a large part of the psyche that was a large part of the British psyche that was activated as part of the Leave campaigns. The ideas of taking back control, whatever that means, it's the same as Make America Great Again. But, and then you have the other side, which is, we are people with nothing to lose, therefore we're going to have a protest vote, we're going to have a kick out at the establishment. The combining of those two things is such a poisonous combination, because it's reactionary, it's emotion first, not fact first. And obviously when you have a binary referendum, in or out, it means that these things aren't predisposed to nuanced debate. They're predisposed to, well, are you this or are you that? And that's definitely not how you can look at, Britain. Like, it doesn't make sense.
That's true.
And that's why I would argue, even if we did have the referendum as was, if we would have had a period of reflection after that referendum, before triggering Article 50, it would have meant that there would have been, even if it wasn't a healthy debate, because fuck me, Joe Cox, a sitting MP, was shot just before the referendum. Even if it wasn't a peaceful debate, it would have been a learned and nuanced debate into what the pros and cons of Britain being in Europe are or out of Europe are, what the pros and cons of being part of like, you know, the world's largest trading bloc versus striking out into like, you know, our own, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff could be the referendum could have been a catalyst to those conversations, as opposed to the first time and the last time it looks like we'd have that conversation before making a big old decision.
So was it the fact that we called Article 51 that the EU said that we can no longer come back into the EU even if we had a second vote about it? Was that the reason why they've said that, or was it the fact that we were just having the thoughts of leaving the EU?
No. So I think once Article 50 was triggered, the EU then basically once Article 50 is triggered, what's triggered? The UK started the diplomatic process of removing themselves from the EU, as in you know, the EU Parliament and all of the supranational, you know, organisations and stuff. And so and so I think that is, but obviously, like, I like politics, I'm a bit of a political nut, but I don't know the specifics of that question.
I just know that the EU, I can't remember when it was, but they from the moment we decided that we were leaving the EU, they said that even if you vote to leave, you cannot come back into the EU.
Well, I mean, you got to understand, the EU is 27 other countries.
Yeah, exactly.
And they each got their own, like, you know, they each have their own, you know, internal issues to deal with. Like, Brexit is not the biggest thing on many EU countries' plate.
No, it's not, but it's just kind of, it could possibly be the pin rolling, or the catalyst to other countries thinking, oh,
the first domino.
That's the domino. That's the word I was actually looking for. Every other country deciding, like, hey, well, if Britain can leave the EU, why don't we leave the EU?
Yeah, but there's a case. Yeah, it's true. But there's a case to argue that Britain wasn't even in the EU in the same way as many other countries.
It's true.
Weren't part of Schengen, weren't part of the Euro. Specifically, you know, Britain made a point of when it was, you know, joining the EEA as it was in the 1970s, that, you know, we were going to retain all of our, you know, national sovereignty and all this kind of stuff, which once again speaks to how Britain imagined itself in the world after the Second World War, and after, like, you know, the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Because after you have, you know, what's being referred to now as the Windrush generation and the rebuilding of the country after the Second World War, the last time that Britain could pat itself on the back and be like, no, we defeated the fascists, it meant that in the ensuing years, Britain on a global scale, I think, or at least I believe, didn't have to reckon with its colonial legacy. It could, in the same way that Britain often does, it exports the pain, it brushes it under the carpet, you can go stiff upper lip. The wealth of this country can all be here. Meanwhile, it doesn't exist without Jamaican plantations, and doesn't exist without, like, you know, Indian like knowledge and resources. So I think it's a weird thing that we're only having these conversations now in 2018 and 2019, and whenever the referendum was, 2017, 16, whatever. We're only having these conversations about Britain's colonial legacy, its empirical legacy. We're only having those conversations way after the fact, because that's how long it takes for things to, you know, really take effect.
It's crazy.
Yeah, man, it is pretty mad.
And I think actually, Boohoo found this just hilarious, just in general. So I read this article from the Metro about Boohoo, you know, the clothing site. So they had this fake fur item of clothing on their website, which actually all the information, no fur contains blah blah blah, turns out actually contained real fur.
Right.
So they were advertised. They've been slammed for misleading people, saying it wasn't real fur and it was real. It was fake fur and it was real fur. And I just thought it was funny. It's just kind of like what was it last year? Was it last year or the year before with H&M? The H&M scandal, was it last year?
Yeah.
It's just like, how do these big conglomerates get things like this to the final public line?
How many people had to sign up on
Yeah,
this
you
thing?
know.
Yeah, I mean, like so like the issues there about like the ethics of fur clothing and fur in the fashion industry, I think it speaks to fast fashion, which is totally different from like, you know, how fur used to be used as part of clothing and stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's weird when fashion becomes not only just industrialized, but like it becomes hyper transient and fleeting. You buy, you know, a pair of £30 jeans, they break within 3 months, you buy another pair of £30 jeans. That attitude of buying and buying and buying to get more and more and more, quicker and quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that really fucks up a lot of, because it's just the economy of scale. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not for real fur in clothing. I disagree with it, but obviously I'm definitely not going to tell, you know, indigenous Inuit communities that they can't, like, you know, trap bears and wear pelts and things like that, because it's clearly different, coming with a different power dynamic. Meanwhile, when it's an industrialized, no, sorry, not an industrialized, but when it is an industry, the industry of trapping, the capitalist industry of trapping and stuff, I super disagree with it, because, you know, it speaks to creating false scarcity, jacking up prices, and over farming the resources. It's the same thing, like, you know, overfishing and issues like that. Plus, Canada Goose, who are a famous clothing brand, they famously have been hounded by PETA, who also have their own issues, but they've been hounded by PETA for their use of real fur consistently. And Canada Goose at the start of 2018 had a massive advertising campaign. I work in a cinema. Canada Goose were trailing their things before films. This was going on across the world. And I noticed, just because in the way that you work in cinema and you see these things, and I live in London and you're on the tube, you read the metro, etc., I just saw the mad increase of people wearing Canada Goose.
Oh yeah, I've seen it as well.
Yeah, man, and it just wasn't always a thing in the UK before, like this year, to the same extent.
No,
and I'm like, that is worrying for me, because I know that the amount of things that are being sold here, think about how many foxes and badgers and whatever the fuck comes from had to be unnecessarily killed. Also, fur is one of the most wasteful industries around agriculture. So, do you know what I mean? Like, they just get the fox, kill it, discard all of the internals, and then just use the skin to put on a jacket.
Yeah.
Very wasteful. Whereas, like, you know, what I was saying about indigenous Inuit cultures or many other indigenous cultures, they won't just kill the animal and then just use the skin. They'll kill it and they'll cook it and da-da-da-da. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They'll put the animal to better use. In an age of, well, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Like Forrest Gump.
You much of a gamer?
I've always been I've always been in the periphery of big gamers.
Okay.
I've never been a massive gamer myself.
Okay.
I was like a FIFA, CODs,
Fair.
like, you know, social gamer. But yeah.
GTA?
Yeah, man. I played GTA San Andreas for a long time. My brother had it, and then I loved, like, my interaction with GTA recently has just been listening to the radio show playlists, because they're sick.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The new GTA that's set to come out, GTA 6, it's meant to be the most realistic game that they have ever brought out to date.
I'm not sure if I want realism from my GTA game.
I know. But they've been working on it for a very long time, but they're looking to improve from the last game, all the facial animation, all the cars, all the motorcycles, the boots, so it's like that. It feels like we're going towards that virtual reality type. What's the film that came out last? Ready Player One. I don't know if you.
I work in a cinema, so I saw most of it. Yeah.
I read the book around the time when the film came out, only because it seemed like one of those books that you really need, one of those things that you really need to read as opposed to watching. the book it's I recommend it to anyone to read because the description in it. I've never seen the film, but I watched the trailer, and from from everything I read in the book, when I watched the trailer, I was like, that's what I saw in my head. When I read this book, this is the world that literally they created it all from words. It's absolutely magical. But yeah, it just feels like we're going towards that whole direction with virtual reality and things becoming more realistic, next gen consoles. I mean, I haven't played a console in a very long time. The only game I'm playing right now is Fortnite because it's uber popular. But other than that, I mean, I haven't had the time to play games for a while. But I think maybe that's making time for myself, like you were saying at the beginning of the show. Like, if you're always doing something, always busy, although you're doing it for yourself, you're not taking time for yourself, so it's different.
So weird enough, a thing that combines gaming and one of the answers I gave right at the very start about rest and learning how to rest up and getting massages this year and stuff. Gaming for so many people that I've known has been how they actually rest, how they zone out, because your mind is like it's not fully passive, but it isn't in a work mode. Do you know what I mean? And then obviously your hands will be actually occupied, and during that time, people's conscious minds are occupied. It means their subconscious mind can often work through stuff and can be dealing with other issues. So I think that's super interesting, especially in in roaming games, your classic Fallout, GTA, all that kind of stuff. Red Dead, the new Red Dead game just came out. All this sort of stuff. All those games where not only are you playing a game as a character, but your character has consequences. There's decisions that are made that literally affect the choices that can be made in the game. You're effectively existing in a world as a character. And that, in terms of GTA, will only get more and more it'll only be more and more immersive as the technology, the graphics, the immersion will only become more and more as the technology gets better. When there is the first, fully playable virtual reality GTA game, oh my lord, I'm not sure what that's going to do to the world. It might be great. It might be literally awful.
I remember when the last GTA game came out, lots of people didn't come into work. People do that now for games. I'm going to take the week off the new GTA game came out.
And which brings on to another point, the gaming industry made more money than the music industry in the UK last year.
I can see that only because of Fortnite. Is just as a game platform, it's just.
Because you think about the stuff that has to go into a game.
Yeah.
You got to have voice actors. You got to have all the technical back stuff. You got to have so many different. Some of the most progressive and forward-thinking art is being actually made in video games recently, which is very, very interesting.
No, it's really cool. What do you think of the state of hip hop at the moment? Because I know you're a lyricist yourself, so.
So I define myself as a hip hop poet.
Okay.
And what do I think about the state of hip hop right now? So apart from the headlines of hip hop being the most the most sold music across the world, the most listened to music across the world. Outside of the music, it's also it's the dominant force in popular culture around the world. So apart from that kind of stuff about just hip hop straight up running the world, not even debatable, it just does.
Yeah.
Apart from all that stuff, I think that the most interesting things that are going on in hip hop now is hip hop not in the Anglophone world, hip hop across the world, hip hop culture across the world. The fact that I could go to basically any town or city in the world and see graffiti, see some form of breakdances, maybe combined with the traditional dance of the area. Hear MCs spitting over any type of hip hop beat, be it a modern trap influence beat. Lots of places still cracking 90s boom bap. 90s boom bap is still the beat in lots of Scandinavian countries. Battle rap's huge in Scandinavia. You want to talk about DJing in obviously in China and Japan and a lot of the East and South Asian countries is one of the pillars of hip hop that's at the forefront. Do you know what I mean? I think the hip hop's always in a good place, because no matter how much they say hip hop is dead, hip hop saves its true citizens. Like, hip hop as a culture, as a thing that can be carried around and done by people, it's a tradition that's just been started in the history of global cultural traditions. It's only been around since the mid-70s, and therefore I have belief that that hip hop now, because it's only 45 years old, it's now doing the type of reflection that an adult would do when an adult becomes 45. You talk about the elder statesmen of hip hop that are now that are now growing into being adults. I'm talking stereotypically men here, obviously, and they have kids, and they think about, oh, what should I be rapping about? Ice Cube, Snoop Dogg, just to pick those two examples for a start. They've now spent 10-15 years at least as to a whole generation of people, not primarily just rappers. They're also actors. They are business people. Snoop Dogg's got his own football league. He does TV shows. All this sort of secondary content around the specific hip hop pillars, which they still are. Snoop Dogg's released like 3 albums in the past 4 years. Ice Cube just released an album. There's more names, but just because I rate these two people, and specifically, here's a good one, because these two examples come from a history of. They come from the time when gangster rap had its big moment of fear in the public image. Obviously, Ice Cube and Doggy and Doggy Style, all of the Snoop Dogg stuff. Like, what both of those artists could do in bridging the gaps between East Coast and West Coast.
Yeah.
Ice Cube producing his stuff with the Bomb Squad. Snoop Dogg going over and being respected in the East Coast. I think that kind of bridging of boundaries and maturity in philosophy and maturity in the culture internally means that the culture is in a good place, not necessarily the best place, and obviously it fractures. It fractures as you go into more and more subcultures and niches. But overall, I think that hip hop is in a good dialectic place right now. It can discuss with itself and have good dialogue with itself to be better than it has been.
Yeah.
R. Kelly is a part of hip hop, arguably.
Yeah.
And obviously, the Surviving R. Kelly documentary came out, and it was after a year of the Me Too movement being repopularized. And hip hop is not afraid to address its transphobia, its homophobia, its sexism, and not that it's been afraid to address it before, but now I think the institutions and traditions and ways of doing hip hop are being fundamentally changed because we have to address the imbalances that exist within hip hop. Hip hop is not external from the wider society that we live in, and so. But it's also, but it's also a culture and a tradition within and in of itself. So, for hip hop to exist right now, we have to be aware of what's happening in the world and how can hip hop do it better. We have to be aware of what's going on in the world and think, how can hip hop help move this forward, help progress this? Like, there was a quote that I think it was Ice Cube. It may have been KRS-One who said that hip hop is the dream that Martin Luther King dreamed. It's the
I can see that.
It is the culture in which you are not judged on the color of your skin. You're judged on the content of your character.
Yeah.
Because how do we as humans understand the content of someone's character? We listen to them, we look at them, we hear them. We see the way they move, they dance. We hear the way they speak, we hear the way they rap. We see what they do with their bodies in relation to technology. That's DJing. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's ways in which hip hop comes out that is central to human expression, but not centered on things like race or immediate, surface stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm a hip hop idealist. I'm a stan about these things. I'm in a very purist, I would argue, space right now. I'm not always in this mood around hip hop, but right now in this moment, in what you've asked me, that's roughly where I am. On
Okay,
hip-hop.
cool.
But yeah, go.
So like, it's just more of like maybe the new styles of, I guess, hip hop.
Yeah.
In a sense of,
Trap rap. Humana.
you know, mumble rap and all this. Like, it feels like it started from a place of not much more lyricism than this other stuff, and now.
So. Do you mean more lyricism in trap music?
No, just in hip hop as a general genre. It just felt like, or culture even. It just felt there was more lyricism, or just actually talking about something in hip hop, as opposed to nowadays. It just feels like I have an idea, a coat hanger. Then I just start rapping off coat hanger. Hey, coat hanger. Hey, you just drop a new nice beat on that, and it's a banger, you know. It's just like it's
coat hanger, big banger, dropping clangers. I don't know.
Yeah, like something like that. And it's like, oh snap, he used coat hanger. It's like, it's just, where's the, I don't know if try is the word, or thoughts, or using their own thoughts, or even like stuff like Drake. I dislike him with a passion.
Okay.
But he makes good music. I cannot deny that. He makes good music, but just his artist work ethic, I dislike that. Just the fact that I know that obviously it's people like what's his name? P. Diddy and stuff like, he doesn't write any of his own stuff. But I know that P. Diddy doesn't write his own, because he's hands up, I don't write my own stuff. But Drake, I've been a fan of Drake since back when I was in university, when I first found Drake.
Disclaimer, I have a shockingly low knowledge of Drake.
It's cool. I only know it from the standpoint of, I was looking into samples around this time, because I'm a producer. I was interested in what samples people use and how close they stick to the sampled song and how much of the original song they use. So I was listening for a load of Drake songs, and then there was one song I was listening to the sample of, and I was like, this is basically Drake's song. But and it's basically he used word for word the chorus. And I was just like, I understand recontextualization, but the worst one for me is I Get Lonely Too. There's a song by Drake called I Get Lonely Too. Word for word is fan mail by TLC.
Oh wow, I love TLC.
Word for word it is fan mail by TLC. Even the melody sounds similar. Okay. And I was like, I listened to it one time. When I first heard it, I was like, this song, I was singing along to it from the first listen. I was like, this song sounds way too familiar. And the thing with me is, if you're gonna do that, I don't mind you doing this song and calling it I Get Lonely Too, whatever, but say it's a cover. At least say it's a cover. I know people out there that who've listened to Drake, I Get Lonely Too, and they think Drake has just written this song.
Yeah, but this is the classic example of like when, I think it was Drake, he did the Lauryn Hill X Factor rework.
I dislike that song as well, only because but for me it's the sample is too loud for too much of the song. It's just like the sample overpowers the actual words of what he's actually saying for me.
So here's a question for you then. Sampling is de rigueur within hip hop.
Yes, of course.
That's fine. So I guess the question is, how do we make sure that the producers now are paying respects to producers before?
I guess it's...
And it's a follow-up question.
Okay.
Do you think that's the producer or the musician's responsibility, or do you think it's the audience's responsibility? Because I don't necessarily blame Drake for loving Lauryn Hill.
No, of course not.
Remaking the song, if you want to call it.
No, I mean, I don't mind the song. I just dislike the use of the sample, of how loud the sample is in this track.
Okay.
Just for me, it just feels like it overpowers the vibe of the... I'm missing not that I'm missing the words, but it's just the sample itself is going throughout the whole thing, and even when he starts rapping, it doesn't go any loud, it doesn't get any quieter. It just stays the same loudness throughout the whole song. And that to me is annoying, but the song itself, like I said, Drake makes amazingly great music, and I can't fault him for that, but just as an artist, I don't know, maybe it's the artist, because the artist must know that they've taking it from someone else
Yeah.
to then, before they're using it and before they're releasing it, especially if you're a big name,
Yeah.
you know that your fans, if they hear this song by you, automatically they're going to think it's your song unless you say something. Unless you say, it's inspired by, or
Yeah.
maybe I watched da-da-da, and it's... But
Yeah.
if you don't tell your audience, your fans, how are they going to know? Because a lot of fans, very few of them, I know that I do, because I look into things. I want to know where this comes from, or if this is a sample,
I
or
would
stuff
say
like
there
that.
are more fans who are actively seeking out
Yeah.
further information about their music now. But obviously, we live in an age of streaming.
Yeah, yeah.
Not only is it millions more people just listening to music, necessarily there will be a bunch more people actually looking
Yeah, of
for
course.
it. But yeah, go on.
But I mean, I can only speak from my point of view, but I know that I look into it, but I know there's a lot of people that don't look into it, and they would just take what an artist says as gospel as opposed to looking deeper into it. So to answer your question, I think it's the producer maybe, as opposed, and I think it's everyone's responsibility.
Yeah.
In a way, it's everyone's responsibility, because it's the producer's responsibility for using that sample and then telling people that he's used this sample and he's taken inspiration from this other person. But then it's also, you can't just read something and take it as face value.
Yeah, I think we need to be a lot more, we as audiences and
Yeah.
listeners and consumers of music need to be more critical in our consumption
Yes.
of music and in our knowledge of the music we
100%,
consume.
yeah.
Because I mean, we're all aware that streaming does absolutely nothing for the actual pockets and funds of our favourite
Yeah,
artists.
you need like, what,
And
10,000 listens to make a pound or
all
something
that kind
like
of
that.
stuff. And so I think, literally, in the literal sense of the word, literally, the least we can do is listen and learn when we are interested in the work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, actually, let me give you an interview.
Hear me?
So you were saying, because I picked up when you said it earlier, you said you were from Chelmsford. Did you grow up there in Chelmsford, in Essex?
Yeah, man. I grew up in Chelmsford, Essex, born in St John's Hospital. Moved out of there when I went to uni in East London.
No, okay, cool. So have you lived in East London for the rest since
Yeah,
then?
lived in East London then, so literally between Essex and East London. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I mean, really close to
claim-
each other anyway.
I
yeah.
claim both. Do you know what I mean? Like I ran a creative arts studio. I co-founded a creative arts studio and gallery space in Barking as well.
Okay.
Like near Chadwell Heath Way. Basically in between Dagenham and Chadwell Heath. And so in between living in Walthamstow, West Ham, Leytonstone, Stratford, going to uni at the University of East London, campuses in Docklands, but also a campus in Stratford, living in Essex, coming into London to drink as a teenager, whatever, from coming into Brick Lane, that's all East London. Yeah, I feel very, very comfortable saying that I'm from Essex/East London. I'm not 100% saying that I'm not comfortable saying that I'm from East London just yet, although I have lived here for 5 years. I'm from Essex/East London.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fair. And you define yourself as a hip hop poet, but are you originally a rapper? Are you originally a poet? Where is your writing background come from? Or your writing roots? That's the
Okay,
question.
where are my writing roots? My writing roots are definitely in hip hop. So the reason why I call myself a hip hop poet is because I feel that I'm a poet working from the culture of hip hop.
Okay.
I can only really conceive of the poetry that I wanted to write coming out of my love and knowledge of hip hop, but also existing, within the world in which I grew up. So 2000s UK to London and stuff. And so I have a lot of, you're gonna think for a second.
That's cool.
Have fun while you transcribe it. Yeah, so I call myself, and I chose the name The Repeat Beat Poet
Yeah.
before I actually was regularly writing poetry. I'd written song lyrics and stuff, a couple of random songs before that, but I gave myself the name The Repeat Beat Poet and then retroactively prescribed meaning to it because I just liked the way it sounded. And that's how I've started writing poetry as well. I started writing poetry because I needed to write, I had something to say, and I liked the way that the stuff sounded. But the phrase Repeat Beat Poet, what that means to me now as I've grown into the term is about hip hop and the specific type of poetry that I was most into when I started, which was beat poetry. So repeating the beat, the act of a DJ getting a break, cutting it and turning it into a whole new song by just repeating that beat and isolating it. That idea always interested me because it was the idea of going really, really deep into something and expanding it out into something entirely new. But then also the idea of beat poetry. I loved the stream of consciousness style of writing that I was reading from Gregory Corso and obviously Kerouac and Ginsberg and those sorts of classic Ferlinghetti and all the beats. And so in my mind, I wanted to try and combine these two things. I knew I loved the kind of thoughts that I could reach when listening to hip-hop music, but then also I loved following the train of thought, and I loved the process of the train of thought that was in beat poetry writing. And so I guess my writing roots are those two avenues, but more specifically now that I've been writing for 4 years and I've got a better grasp of how I want my poetic voice to progress. I think my writing roots also come from the church. I was born and raised Christian, evangelical Christian. So I was going to church at some point it would be 4 or 5 times a week I'd be in church. I'd be playing music, I'd be in the worship band, I'd be hearing preachers and preachers talk. The rhythms that are involved in a preacher giving a sermon are things, and they are speech patterns that I've tried to achieve the same results of in my poetry. Whether I've actually gone through those specific patterns or not is a different question, but it's definitely in the way that I am as a person, so I know it's in my writing. Similarly, I've binged myself on hip hop as much of it as I can from as many places as I can, since I wanted to become a writer, since I was on my gap year and went to uni to do English. I was I know that hip hop has the sheer wealth of anything I could ever want to say within it in any medium, be it art, be it movement, be it lyrics and stuff like that. And so I knew that there would be the tools within traditional poetry, but specifically beat poetry and the cultures of hip hop. I knew there would be the tools within those things for me to be able to speak my truth in a way that I wanted it to be spoken, and that I'll be able to have control of it. Yeah.
So I'm gonna enjoy listening to that back.
Yeah.
Why have you disappeared? Questions.
What else we got?
What else have I got?
Boom, 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 boom.
What was the first, thing that made you take poetry seriously? Because you said you've only been writing for 4 years, so what made you pick up that pen and write that first poem?
I wrote a terrible, terrible poem, and this is nowhere else on the internet. Nobody else knows this yet, apart from the person I read the poem to, my family. I wrote an awful poem called Africa Adjourned, which doesn't really make sense. And it was about US, basically it was about George Bush not caring about black people, and it was just after Hurricane Katrina, and I was in America visiting family over there, and I wanted to express that I was really pissed off about how people who looked like me were being totally forgotten about and mistreated in Katrina. And so I wrote this awful poem called Africa Adjourned, and I read it to one of my elder cousins, and I remember her reaction. She loved it, but not only did she love that I'd written it, she loved that I understood this thing, this sense of being black, but she also just encouraged me. And then 3 or 4 other times I'd written kind of like, song, poem type, just thoughts that I had on XYZ thing. And then I read them to somebody whose opinion of me as a person I trust, not necessarily somebody who's even into poetry or anything, but somebody who knows what I am trying to say when I'm trying to say it. There's been 3 or 4 of those instances, and they are the instances that made me want to pursue poetry, because it made me think that I can communicate. Really. Yeah.
So do you write?
We'll wait for this rolling thing to go.
Yeah, of course. But I was thinking, what was the question? So, do you write all your poems for? Okay, are you writing for something? Like, is it a point that you're writing for when you write a poem, or is it just you just write for writing's sake sometimes?
Interesting question, because as I said, I gave myself a poet name, a performance name, an artist name.
I had a question about that as well.
And so, in my head, I created an arbitrary sort of binary split in between what was, this is in the first 2.5, 3 years of writing. I created a binary split in between what is the Repeat Beat poet's voice and energy and aura, and what is Peter de Graft Johnson, my name, what am I trying to say? And so a lot of the time,
Kind
when
of
I
like
was just writing,
TI versus TIP kind of thing.
all this sort of stuff, you know what I mean? Like, it's not uncommon for artists, especially poets, to want to have a mediated persona through which they can say things they wouldn't otherwise be able to say in their own body.
Yeah.
And that's where I was for the first 2.5 years. I was writing a lot of bars, a cappella stuff. That was very like braggadocious, very much I'm gonna take space and let you know just how good I think I am at this rap shit.
Hip hop,
you know what I mean? Hip hop is a blood sport, competitive sport. And so I wanted to prove to myself that I had that club in my bag. And this is obviously at the same time as writing all the other stuff as well that didn't necessarily fit under that banner, but was driven by that energy. Yeah. And then the energy started, and then I started to realize that what I was saying as the Repeat Beat poet wasn't the fullness of what I wanted to address in poetry. And so when I write poetry, I don't always start from an angry place. A lot of poets do, but that's not always me. I always start from an inquisitive space. I always want to use the poem as a machine to figure something out about either what I think or about the world or about, the way that something has come to be the way it is. I think that's where almost all of my poetry starts from. Apart from when I sit down to write a story about something. I've got a couple of real story poems where I use the poem as a vehicle to tell a specific story of something that's happened. Not necessarily in a way to understand it, but in a way to just get it out of my head.
Okay.
So case in point, one time I saw a dude get beaten up by a group of other people, and I was on my way home, and it was winter, and I'd just come back from being in Ghana, seeing my family on holiday. So I come from being in this like very nurturing, warm, familial space to coming back to cold, brutal, literally elbow to the nose like type of London, and that thing screwed with my head, and so I had to write a story about it to figure out, once again, to make sense of it. But now, writing more comfortably in my own head as me and not trying to write as a mediated persona of myself for a Repeat Beat poet, now I'm finding that I'm doing a lot more self-investigative writing, because I know that I have the Repeat Beat poet club in my bag. The persona is there, it's a part of me, but it's not all of me, and now I'm just writing from other parts of me. That makes sense.
So you run a hip-hop poetry event?
Yep. So
that was the start of my question, but just the end of my question as well.
So the hip hop poetry event I run is called Painting Poetry.
Okay.
I run it as part of the Painting Poetry Collective. We're a crew, obviously.
I've met a few of your guys before.
Yeah, man. It started out as an open mic night at SOAS a good few years ago. There was a few editions of that, and then it went on hiatus as the person graduated, the main person was running at the time. And then through the Apples and Snakes Writing Room program, that was how the current Painting Collective came together and relaunched the night. But I'm also I'm part of a live hip hop jam that happens the first Sunday of every month at the book club in Shoreditch. That's called Imaginary Millions, and it's also a record label and a staple and these things as well. But at its core, I think, or the way it exists to the public at least right now in a predominant way, is as a live hip hop jam. So like I'm kind of like a resident MC or a house MC with a band there as well.
Okay. Do you have any books, or are you working on any books, or is that a future aspiration for you?
So at the start of this interview, I was like, this year, 2019, is going to be a year of me producing projects. I'm working on projects here.
Okay.
So all of last year, I was developing a one-man show, a one-man poetic show, poetry show, spoken word theatre show. Who knows what type of show? No. Really, it's a hip-hop spoken word theatre show. That's about as tight as I can get it. Scratch that. It's a hip hop spoken word show. It's multimedia, and it combines film, obviously poetry, music, and social commentary. It's very research based, very factual as well. And this whole idea that I had for all of last year, it was about a show that effectively was about deconstructing overarching whiteness as it exists in contemporary British society, in the age of resurgent white nationalism, in the age of your Stephen Yaxley Lennons and like Padiga, and Australian white nationalism, ethno-nationalism in white ethnicities across the world. It was about addressing that. And that idea, weirdly enough, is still in the back of my mind brewing away, but it means I keep on having to update it, and I haven't been able to give it the time to really develop it and research it in the way I like.
Yeah.
And so, also a thing that's going to be going on, a lot of last year I was gigging a hell of a lot, but I thought that I wouldn't write. Turns out I was writing loads, but it was poetry that I couldn't slot into the set I was doing at that time.
Yeah.
Now I've got a larger body of more introspective, page appropriate, in inverted commas, more like image based, slower paced poetry. And now I have a lot of this kind of stuff, and so I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, don't hold me to anything, but I'm gonna hopefully put out a chapbook this year. But this year I'm a lot more open, and I will be a lot more open to letting the work come out in whatever format it needs to take. Yeah. Last year I was pushing it out in a live context because I knew that I could do that in any place at any time. I could just do it. But when it comes to putting out a body of work that's going to be somewhat crystallized in amber, it's going to be a thing that I will relinquish control over. I want to be able to do that this year, but I want to do it right this year, which means give myself the time to do it. So ultimately, there's the idea about the one-man hip-hop spoken word show. There's an EP that I'm working on with a bunch of music songs, obviously, but music songs and poetry on the EP. There's the idea about the poetry pamphlet as well. There's three main worlds, but they're each going to come along when the time is right, I find.
And I think my final question for you will be, what kind of words of wisdom do you have for anyone up and coming, maybe? Actually, I do have another question after this.
The penultimate question.
But this is the penultimate question. Anyone up and coming, anyone that maybe has been doing it for a long while, but they're just not sure of if maybe they should stick in it, or just any advice coming from a more more seasoned poet that's been out there for a while.
Cool. So, okay. I'm gonna paraphrase I'm gonna paraphrase Gabriel Akamo, aka Amo. Me and him were having a conversation one time about the performance of trauma in poetry. Speaking obviously as like, you know, a black British guy in the world of poetry, there's a trend, for want of a better word, of performing your trauma for the applause of an audience. One of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to anybody starting writing poetry in the contemporary time, you know, in the age of where button poetry is popular, that East Coast American Chicago slam style is. So my advice would be, don't feel that you have to write about your trauma singularly, and write about anything you want about. That's a very specific piece of advice to anybody who's existing within a marginalized community who comes to poetry. And then in a broader sense, you know, my advice to all aspiring poets is always find your local open mic night, go there, sit, listen, soak in other poets around you and what other people are saying and doing. You might not like all of it, it would be weird if you did, but it will teach you an idea about your taste and your voice and what your preferences are. Immerse yourself in the culture, especially if it's like, you know, the spoken word culture. Go to nights. Second piece of advice, create your own pantheon, create your own canon, create your own, you know, create your own list of the best poets and the best poetry ever, so that when you think about creating your own work or maybe developing your own work or voice further, it gives you a foundation which is not the same as all the foundations that have come before you. And obviously we can talk about, you know, the out of whack power dynamics that exist in the poetic literary canon, especially in the English language world. And so I think that's super important as well, to create your own canon, create your own, create your own best piece, create your own like library of work. Third piece of advice is about being in your own body and feeling your own body. Poets spend a lot of time in our own heads, writing and thinking and doing all this kind of stuff. Sometimes the best way to write or to be a writer is to take time away from the page, away from the pen, away from that, and be in your body, take care of your body, parity of body and mind. Be it mental health, be it obviously like, you know, going for a run, getting them endorphins up, get a massage, go for a walk, be in nature, all that kind of stuff. I think that is as much a part of a successful professional, creative and poetic practice as, like, you know, the actual primary product, the work itself.
And this will be my final question is, what any up-and-coming poets that you've seen at maybe open mic nights or something like that, anyone that comes to mind?
That's such a difficult question.
Sorry.
There's so many.
I know there's so many, but it's just like, for me, it's more of a question of, for people to look out for them to look, hold them to listen to, check out the works of. That's all the question is, really.
Okay. So, right. I'm just going to start listing them, and I'm going to keep my explanations as to why I'm listing them fairly short, so I can list them up short.
Yeah.
True Menders. True Menders is a Birmingham/London-based MC and poet.
Yes.
She can spit on almost anything. She has a really distinctive flow where she will do hollow rhymes. She'll do, like, you know, madly intricate internal rhymes, and if you can keep up with what she's saying, she says some mad interesting shit. And also, I think she's bringing out a lyric book in this year 2019.
I'm looking forward to that.
And so True Menders is one. Tanaka Fuego.
Yes.
Once again, Tanaka doesn't need me to blow smoke up his ass any more than I already do. But basically, he is a poet who mainly works in spoken word, but their work is intimate, deals with ideas of the fluidity of gender, and I think the reason why I'm mentioning Tanaka again is because They've just been everywhere across the past half of last year.
Yeah.
Very, very well travelled, and the places in which they've put their poetry, don't get me wrong, even within the world of poetry events, they've always had an attention as to where they're performing and who they're performing to.
Yeah.
I rate them. Birdspeed. Birdspeed recently won the Genesis Poetry Slam final.
Okay, cool.
At the end of last year.
I need to get her on my show.
Yeah, so Birdspeed, once again, not only is she a dancer, an illustrator, a poet, and all of those things to an incredibly high standard. She combines those in her performances with an attention to detail in a way that I've rarely seen in any contemporary poet. And it's one of the most inspiring and daunting things that I've seen in the poetry scene. So there's Birdspeed as well. Who else is coming up you should pay attention to? T-Star Nay.
I haven't heard of that person.
T-Star Nay is
the trumpeter.
Yeah. So,
teacher and trumpet,
Yeah, trumpeter as well as an MC and poet.
Yeah.
They've been doing a lot of regular performances at Flow Vortex, which is a night at the Hideaway in Streatham run by the Flow Assist. And what makes T-Star Nay so interesting is that she brings a musicality to her rhymes that make her saying very, very. It makes the content of what she's saying, which is usually not too complex or intricate, but it raises it to a level of of intuitive musicality that makes it sit in your head and makes you understand it really deeply, really quickly. She's a teacher as well.
Yes, she is.
Yeah, and I think it stems from that nature of being a teacher as well. She's bloody good at imparting information, a lot of information, really quickly in a way that you understand. I think that's really wicked. Bite-sized. T-Star Nay. Who else? Is it specifically young people out to shout out?
Just up and coming, for 2019 to look out for.
Desiree.
I think I have heard of her, yeah.
Yeah, Desiree is a powerhouse black female poet who was doing a lot of stuff last year, including being a part of a couple of theatre shows. No, she had her own one-woman show, and now she's doing more shows at the Vault Festival. She's going to be around other festivals. It's just the way that she speaks her truth, not only in a powerful sense, but in that word power is very overused in relation to specifically black, specifically female poets, because we just don't hear their points of view as often. But the reason why Desiree is something I want to shout out is that, like, every time I saw her perform last year, not only is she really supportive, she goes to nights, she invests in the culture, she's a part of the scene, unquote. But I rate that her immersion in the culture comes out in how widely read she sounds when she reads. She sounds like she knows a wealth of poetry, a wealth of ways to perform. Her performance, she's got a great pacing, great use of space, great use of high energy and low energy and that kind of thing. Desiree as well, she coming through. Quick shout outs to Tyrone Lewis. Yeah. Tyrone Lewis has been performing for 10 plus years on the poetry scene, but this year is going to be the year that he finally brings out a book. And that book's going to be insane. Yeah. It's going to be called Blackish on Burning Eyelids. And so shout out to Tyrone Lewis. Also shout outs to Bad Betty Press. Yeah. Bad Betty Press are an independent publisher started by Jake Wildhall and Amy Aker. Yeah. That once again they're of the older generation to me in the poetry scene. So the generation of like Deanna Roger and Inua Ellams, Dean Atta, that kind of early first generation of Roundhouse poets and Barbara Young poets. 2004, 5, 6. Holly McNish, Kate Tempest, they were growing up just under them. Okay. I was growing up just under these guys. But yeah, Bad Betty Press are releasing a lot of good stuff this year. There's some of my favourite poetry collections from last year. I think that's all the people I'm going to shout out.
That's
I'll
cool.
be here forever. Yeah.
That's fine. And I guess since we're coming to the end of the show now, do you have anything to shout out, like a plug? That's the word I was looking
plug.
for.
So the plugs are Penting Poetry is going to be on the third Thursday of every month in London, in central London. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for all the Penting stuff. YouTube channel coming soon with all the videos and clips as well. Boomerang Club, long running feature and open mic night held at the Rockland Arms in Hammersmith. That's going to be on the second Wednesday of every month. And you know, I'm so happy to be a part of that crew. So shout out Boomerang Club. Imaginary Millions, live hip hop jam, first Sunday of every month. That's going to be at the Book Club in Shoreditch. We've had everything from 7-piece choirs to dancers to saxophonists to guest MCs, vocalists, singers, musicians. It's probably that's where I push myself the most in a live context recently. So that's also what I'm plugging. I'm plugging my radio show, the Repeat Beat broadcast. It's a 2-hour hip hop poetry radio show that's currently on hiatus, but will be back in the early part of 2019. All the old episodes are available to listen to on Mixcloud. You just search Repeat Beat broadcast, that'll all be there. Finally, what else am I plugging? My clothing label, Sleeping Lion UK, will be coming back this year in 2019. That's definitely a thing to look out for because, hey, where else are you going to get your West African wax print dashikis and other garms? And I suppose,
do you make all those things yourself?
I source them myself, I don't make them myself.
Okay, cool.
It is what you would call an exclusive resale site.
Like dropshipping.
Indeed. And apart from that, if there's anything else, I'm sure you can stick it in the description. I'll send it through to you.
I will do.
Indeed, yeah, man.
But thank you very much for coming on the show, man.
Fucking pleasure. Absolute
It's been an
pleasure,
actually
man.
amazing show. I'm looking forward to listening to this episode back. It's the first episode of 2019.
Hey.
And so thank you very much at home for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this week's show. If you haven't, more for you for sat at home and listening for 1 hour and like nearly 50 minutes. You're an idiot. You know? And but if you have enjoyed it, thank you, and thank you for still being a great listener. And there's more great shows to come this year, so keep
Repeat
tuned.
Beat Poet signing out.
Bye.